We're here today at the Beachcomber, designed by Nino Sydney, and we're going to be talking to Peter Hone and Billy Gruner. Hi guys.
Hi. I'm here with Peter Hone, a Danish artist. He comes from Copenhagen in Denmark, but actually lives in the countryside about 30 miles outside, and runs a fantastic project space with his wife Karen Lind, who's also a renowned artist in Denmark and all over Europe and in Australia as well. They have a very particular type of art making, and for this interview we're going to talk about Peter and the various trips that he's made to Australia over the last 20 years. In fact, he's been so many times, he's like a feature here now, and we consider him a very good friend. And we're going to talk about his connections to Australian artists and how those people have worked with him over the years. So Peter, tell me, when you first came to Australia, how did that happen?
All right. I was in 1998, I think, must have been. I was at an opening in Copenhagen, and one of my friends and colleagues sort of tapped my shoulder and says, "Do you know that guy over there?" And I said, "No, not really. I think what it's about." And he says, "Go and talk to him." And I go talk to him, and this is Mr. John Nixon from Sydney at that time. And I invite him to my studio. The next day I pick him up, and we go into my studio. This day was beautiful because the snow was falling, and he was sort of thinking this was awesome. And he comes into my studio and he says, "I know your work." And he's such a nice man, and we have a really nice day. And he says, "I got to get you to Sydney and do a show." So this is basically how it started. And then in '99, I'm with my wife, actually. We both go to Sydney and show at the CBD. Before this, John then faxes me, because this isn't the age of the faxes. He faxes me and says, "I'm sending over, well, I know they have this young Australian painter, he's coming over. Could you be nice to him and show him around Copenhagen? Can he live with you?" And yeah, sure. So this is then Carl Jenkins coming to already then in '98, coming to our place, without never having met him. So we had some beautiful time, and then yes, of course we have this in '99. And then it's just progressed over the years. You might want to elaborate on that. I don't know.
I first came to notice you. You exhibited with CBD, and then of course you became further involved with other projects that came after that.
Yeah.
And this connection to CBD, and then its sort of history in Sydney in particular was very interesting to me. And so I started to notice that there was a network of people who somehow knew each other. And of course this was very interesting, and I was interested in the artists who were actually making these kind of connections and not being so parochial in their art making, who were looking out and looking to work with other people and being proactive in their own sense. And the only real group that were doing that seemed to come out of that circle. They were clearly active, they were clearly doing things, and clearly had a shared language.
Yeah.
And even though the artists were very different, would you say that's a fair assessment?
Oh yes, absolutely. I think this is a very special time, and I think in the way that things developed, and all of a sudden we found out that we could be more international, and we could have friends in different places, and not having to deal. We found out that we could. Example, I'm doing cardos, which I paint, and I'm thinking, well, I can go to Sydney. I can go and get an old cardo and do it there, and I can pack these small paintings in my suitcase. It doesn't have to be a whole lot of things going on with transportation. You're young, you want to go out and do stuff. And then when you're at the openings, you have to be open and talk to people, and you meet new people, you're getting introduced. Like now, today I'm going out to see Sydney Ball, and yesterday I had a visit with Ian Lewis, and then meeting a lot of people all the time, and I then connect and say oh, I know somebody you ought to talk to, and that's the way it spreads out, and you make connections.
The type of art making is the thing for me. It's like a fan world, if you like. The artists become real fans of formalist styles of art making after the 20th century, and this is the interesting point, because the works themselves are not from the 60s. But it's a dialogue many other people evacuated and sort of thought, well, what can you do with this? Nothing. And what we found was that with artists like yourself and many others, that they actually opened that up and absolutely took off with it. And you know, I mentioned in some other interviews, you know, the connections to other galleries and everything. But in your case especially, I like your work because it has a very idiosyncratic style. And of course, for me, this was the thing I always liked about the modernists. They would take their story and make it their own.
Yeah.
And so that the idea of invention and comes forward.
Yeah.
And with that, originality. And so the thing I liked about your work from the start was these two things.
Well, I think that to me personally, it's very, very important that I have there's a personal aspect that will show in some way of the character of the work. Doesn't really make sense if you just sort of, I'm not going to be like repeating, but it's true that we could talk about families of things, and you feel very much connected to. It could be from New York, or it could be anything, anywhere. You see something, well, you understand it like this, snap. You can see what the work is about.
And maybe one of the most interesting things, Peter, is the idea that your friends appreciate your work. Now, they're not just friends; they're colleagues.
Yeah, colleagues.
These are people whose own ideas you've been engaging with, and this is not common anymore for groups of artists to share language bases, but then to be deeply critical of each other within that, which then produces a different kind of result. I personally know that if my friends don't think I'm doing good work, that really matters to me. you know, it shouldn't, but it does in this particular circle, because you're participating in a legacy and histories and traditions, and there's a different sense of homage there.
Sure.
How do you feel about that?
Well, it's like building blocks. I mean, you could see that many of these things, you say somebody started building these things in many years ago, and we're all in our own way sort of adding to this building block of things. And so yes, but friends or colleagues, I think we have to keep it as like the colleagues. I'm very, very concerned about the colleagues who I know understand my work, or had previously understand. When they look at new work, they sort of instantly will be able to dive into it and say, oh, that's interesting, I can see why you're making this move. Or being honest, which is very, very important, to say, if they go like, what? Why are you going in this direction? You were doing these beautiful works. So, and you know, because I believe in dialogue, and the beauty of what we've been doing over the years is exactly this dialogue. Thanks for now having not only the fax but the email and the internet, makes these things much more efficient, and so we can communicate, we can have dialogues about projects, we can inform. So that's very important.
In looking back a little bit, there's so much to discuss with Peter, it's frightening. So let's talk about the ArtSpace exhibition that was done when Nick Sudis was the director.
We are going to run out of space too, so make it short.
Stop.
No, you've got to finish it properly.
Yeah, we've got to round it up.
Well, now we've got all that in there. But
That's all right.
So let's talk about perhaps one of the significant exhibitions for your Australian campaigns over the years was the wonderful exhibition Constructed Colour done at ArtSpace.
Yeah, it's different venues actually.
Yes.
But yes, true.
We did it at Sydney University, and we did it at ArtSpace at Woomera, and we made some very beautiful works.
Yes.
That was quite a dramatic exhibition at the time, because the kind of art we presented to them was the opposite of what was being shown.
Yeah.
How did you feel about that?
Well, it was kind of hectic. There were, of course, it's very interesting when you're coming from abroad, and you always have the fresh eye. And yeah, it was a great experience, and I could certainly see that this is not what you normally would have showing at, for example, ArtSpace. But it was a beautiful exhibition with a lot of good names in it, a lot of hard work from all who were involved with it. I know you did a lot of work, and Carl Jenkins did a lot of work, and but in the end, beautiful. And very important, you go back with all this in your luggage, and you can show it to everybody. Look what we have done. And